I'm often asked, what are you supposed to be doing in the autumn to your garden? So I thought I would put out 5 of the most common mistakes that people do when they are trying to think about tidying up the garden in the autumn. Hello, I'm Rosie Hardy. This is Rosie Hardy Gardening. If you enjoy our videos, please do subscribe to the channel. So let's start off with cuttings that people want to take in the autumn. So what you've got to remember is that the autumn, the light levels have changed. And this is when you get something called phototropism coming in. And that is where things like the Michaelmas daisies are keyed into flowering, because the day length has got shorter. And then there are other plants which a lot of people love to take cuttings from, such as phlox and penstemon, where that phototropism has told them it's time to die off, it's time to senesce, in which case all of their material is starting to go into, right, I need to lose my leaves, I need to stop flowering, I need to shut down for the winter. And people keep on thinking that, oh look, I've got the odd little bit of cutting material here on something like my penstemon or my phlox, but these plants are in shutdown. So therefore, that plant material that you're taking is also in shutdown and is unlikely to root very well for you. Hence why there are certain cut-off times when you should be and shouldn't be taking cuttings from certain plant materials. So things like phlox and penstemon should leave doing any cuttings once you've got to the beginning of September. That's it. The cut-off date is the end of August. Once you get into September, the light levels are so low that those plants have been triggered into starting to die back. Now, they may not finish flowering for another month or so, but they're inside them, in the plant material itself, it's just going, right, I need to start shutting down, and therefore you're not going to get really good things. So phototropism works in 2 ways. It works in signaling to some plants, like the late flowering plants, that the day length has got shorter, therefore it's time for me to flower. But it also, to your summer flowering plants, goes, we're coming into autumn, it's time for me to finish doing my last hurrah, my last lot of flowering, and starting to shut myself down. So the leaves start to change colour, the flowers start to fade, and therefore they are not the right is not the right time for taking cuttings from that material. So phototropism is it's light triggering plants to react in a certain way. Late flowering plants, it's for them to start flowering. Summer flowering plants, it's for them to start to shut down and die off and senesce. Another thing, cutting back plants. Now, you've got to be very, very careful. Some plants you just don't need to cut back. And there are an awful lot of plants that have square stems. So for instance, like this Physostogia here, it has got square stems here. Now, this was cut back probably in around about beginning of August, which is fine because it has sent up a load of growth. But if you've still got Physostogia or the obedience plants in full flower, you do not want to be cutting them back, because as you can see, these stems here are hollow and everything can get in down there, and you can see they're dying off by the colour that is there. But that's not a problem with this plant in particular, because we did it early enough. But if you're waiting until right at the end of the season, you don't want to be doing that. You do not want to be cutting these square stems. So Physostogia is one of them. Salvias are another. They've got square stems, so you'll have cut them down in the middle of the summer to get a rebloom. This is Salvia Ostfriesland. It's flowering away brilliantly. Leave that growth. Just let it all die back naturally. That will help. It'll protect the crown of the plant. And then a little bit later, maybe in the spring, you can tidy it up. Or if you really want to be tidy, you can tidy it up once it's all gone brown and it's died back properly. So they are things that you don't want to do. And the other square stem things which really you need to be checking that you're not cutting back too much, and that is the agastache. Now, other than leaving agastache up is a good thing because inside all of this flower head that is here are lovely little seeds, and it's also a place for insects to hide. So they are best left up. They're architectural. There's absolutely no problem in leaving those alone, letting them die back naturally. You will have a much better plant in the spring if you do that. Recently, I set up an email newsletter, and if you want to sign up, then please click in the comments link below or scan the QR code on the screen now. If you sign up, you get an exclusive video. This is a video of me explaining colour combinations and plant combinations in real gardens. So what I'm really trying to say with these square stem plants is there are people who don't like having all of this around in the garden. They want it all to look really, really tidy. What I'm trying to say is do not go too low. By all means, cut off the top bit of flower there, but don't go right down. Try not to. Try and leave it all there, especially with something like the agastache here. And if you go and cut here halfway across the stem like that, you've got all of this which is hollow, and water can get in there, the frost can get in there. That will then go down to the crowns and everything else. But if you are someone who likes it to be a little bit tidy, then yes, you can go a little bit lower, but always go to where there is a leaf base and cut above the leaves, just above the leaves, and that way that will stop any water going down and going through into the actual plant material itself. But please try to start leaving all of this up, because it's better for the plants. They will die back naturally. It's better because you might have a little bit of seed in here, or it's somewhere for insects to hide. You know, the insects and the birds will all love you for leaving the material up, and so will the plants, because they will be healthier in the spring. Okay, let's have a little look and see what else I've got here. So my next big thing is mulching. Now, I love people to mulch, and I want you to mulch, but you've got to do it in the correct way. So a lot of people start mulching too early in the autumn. You need to wait until a lot of your plant material is really dying down quite nicely. It is all senescing, and then you can start mulching. So that's one thing, too early. Try and do it just a little bit later. The other reason saying too early, the soil may not be wet enough, and you are not supposed to mulch onto dry ground. That will just make it drier. Make sure that you have allowed the ground to get nicely sodden, and then you can mulch. Secondly, not putting enough mulch on. If you're putting in just a teeny weeny bit of mulch like this, and you're just scattering it around, making everything look lovely and tidy, and you think, oh look, I've mulched it, and it's this. That amount of mulch is not going to do an iota of good to your soil, because it's just not enough. It will disappear really, really quickly and not do anything for your soil. You need to be mulching a good depth, and it's got to be 2 to 3 inches. That's 10 to 15, maybe more actually, centimetres of depth that you need to be using. Now, if that is too much because you haven't got enough of your own garden compost and it's too expensive to buy in, then utilise and mulch one patch in the autumn, and then in the spring, when you've maybe got a bit more mulch, mulch another patch then, or mulch one bit one year, one bit the next year. That way it will be much, much better for you. And if you have only got enough mulch for maybe a small area, then mulch in the spring and let it all be on there, because then it will keep the moisture in there right the way through. The other thing is, what type of soil have you got, and are you putting too much onto certain soils? So if your soil is very good, or your soil is clay soil, then if you over mulch, you get really tall, straggly, big leafed plants which are not doing a lot because they're just getting overfed. Clay soils are very rich, they're very nutritious, and you go and put mulch as well, then you have a bit of a problem there. So clay soils do not want really good, well rotted compost on them. They want it half composted, and you will be better on a clay soil to do the mulching in the spring. All right, so that is that bit. So that is my short bit on there. So we've already done cuttings, we've done cutting down too much, and we've now done mulching. Next, what are we going to look at? So the last thing I wanted to mention of autumn mistakes are bulbs. One, there is the mistake that you buy your bulbs, you put one lot somewhere over there, one lot somewhere over there, somewhere in the house, and you forget about them. Well, that is fine because they can be planted even if they started to sprout. However, they do like to be stored somewhere where it is slightly dark and somewhere where it is slightly cooler. So that is something to be aware of. So if you do buy them and you have an empty bucket or a trug, put all of your bulbs in there and then put it somewhere where it is dry and cool and dark. And then, yes, okay, so if you don't remember them until November or December, that's not a problem. They can still be planted, don't worry. But at least they shouldn't have sprouted too much. So that's the main thing to do. And remember, I've got a crocus and I've got a tulip. The bulbs are different sizes. Now, with the bulbs on this, the crocus bulbs themselves are about 20 centimetres depth. The length of the tulips here from the base to the nipple at the top there is about 45 centimetres. So that's quite a bit of difference. So these are half the size of these. So what's the difference that you need to know? What you need to remember is tulips want to go really deep. Crocus want to be slightly shallower, but you do not want to be planting any of your bulbs too shallow unless they are something like a Nerine, which wants to be on the surface. And there are some bulbs, amaryllis and all of those things that you see that are put in on the surface of compost, they want to be on the surface, but the ones that you're going to put in the garden like these want to be in the ground or they want to be in containers. So how do you know? So something like this is going to grow 15 centimetres high, 6 inches. But I've noticed on this packaging, and it's quite interesting because this could be very confusing for people. These say plant them 7 centimetres deep and then in brackets 2.5 centimetres. So which is it? That 2.5 centimetres is a misprint and it should read 2.5 inches, which means that 7 centimetres and 2.5 inches is exactly the same depth. So that means that something like this, the crocus, is going to be planted at 7 centimetres, which is that amount. So that's quite a bit when you consider the bulb is there. So that's still quite a distance into the ground. So you would be looking at somewhere. If you were putting crocus in a pot, you'd be not putting them at the top here, you'd be putting them down here. However, the tulips like to be planted deep. That is why tulips are planted when you do lasagna planting in pots, in huge big pots. Tulips are always the things at the bottom. And the reason that is because tulips like support. So they're down here, their roots go down, they hold themselves there, and then their shoots come up and they have this narrow shoot that comes up, gets to the surface, and then it does its growing there. But it means that it is held, it is anchored into the ground so that it doesn't flop over all over the place. So that's the reason why these need to be deep. Now these need to be 15 centimetres or 6 inches. So 15 centimetres is that amount. And if I was to put that on this pot, that's up here. So these little pots are too shallow to put a tulip into. You need a much deeper pot to put a tulip in. So remember the depth. So if you are a little bit not too sure and you don't have a measure, then usually, as I said, these are 45 centimetres, these bulbs. So you're usually talking about 3.5 times the depth of the bulb. So if you were to put 3 bulbs together and then like so, and then add a bit, that should be the distance. And that works out just about right. So there you are. So 3.5 times plus a half, that gives you the distance that they want to be down in the ground. And if you're not sure, put your tulips just a little bit lower. They're very happy being low in the ground, all right? And I think this is where a lot of people have problems with their tulips being eaten, is that they are always putting them a little bit too high in the ground, and therefore disturbed ground, the squirrels, other critters come in and go, oh, look, there's some nice bulbs to do. So remember to put them down lower in the ground. So that is what you should be. Check the packaging for how deep they should be going. Tulips lower, crocuses slightly higher. And again, if you were to do 3 times the depth of these, you would find that would be around about the distance that they need to go in the ground as well. So that's another rule of thumb with them. Always add a bit if you're not too sure. So in other words, you know, see what there is. And if you're not too sure, measure it up. I mean, there are planting trowels which you've got to measure on the side, so you know how far you've got to go down to actually do it. Or you can get yourself a cane and you can mark it, and you can put a bit of tape which is, say, red for your tulips, a bit of tape which is yellow for your crocus, and then you just push into that amount of depth. And they're easy planting. So there are easy ways of getting around how deep you plant these things. But try not to put them too shallow. Even the crocus that want to be slightly shallower than the tulips, don't put them too shallow, because again, they want to be at that depth. And if you put them too shallow, again, they'll be easy food for anything that's coming along and wanting something that is there. But at the end of the day, tulips, crocus, they are telling you springs here. They're up, they're lovely. Enjoy them, put them in the ground, put them in containers, and really have fun with them. And remember to plant them. Thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.